Well, welcome back to another episode of 5 Minutes in Church History. These are just short videos, 5 minutes long, on the subject of church history, which are designed to help you begin to get familiar with this important subject. And I'm continuing in my series of about 10 videos that I'm going to do on the Apostolic Fathers, which is basically a name for the earliest Christian writings that we have, written basically at the turn of the first century into the second century, and all the way to about 140 or 50 AD. So these are the writings that were written basically right after the close of the New Testament. And I want to talk with you in this video about the letter called First Clement. It's called First Clement because there's actually another document called Second Clement, but that document was written pseudonymously, almost certainly, later on by a different person. And so First Clement is really the authentic writing of Clement. It's actually technically anonymous. It doesn't identify the author, but traditionally the ancient church, going back to almost the beginning, has attributed this letter to a man named Clement, who was an elder or bishop in the church in Rome. Most people think it was written in about AD 96, although there is debate about that, and some people would date it even earlier. So it was written, in other words, not too long after the last New Testament writing was finished. Many people think that John wrote the Apocalypse or the book of Revelation at the end of this first century in the 90s, and here this would have been written just a few years after that. In fact, this is probably the earliest Christian writing that we have outside the New Testament. It was a writing that was a letter, and it was written by Clement, again a bishop in the church of Rome, to the church in Corinth. Yes, the church that Paul planted. And the occasion for the letter seems to be the fact that the church had actually, probably at the instigation of some proud younger members, deposed all of its elders, and apparently without good reason, because Clement writes to them about this matter. And perhaps he was known to them, even though he was a bishop in Rome. Perhaps he was respected by them. He writes to them about this matter, and he attributes what they did to really sinful motivations like jealousy, and he calls them to repent and to restore their former leaders to office. In this letter, Clement mostly talks about Christian living. It's a very ethical letter, although throughout, of course, you can see certain Christian doctrines that underlie his ethical teaching and exhortation. What I want to do is I want to finish this video by actually reading to you a portion of 1 Clement, particularly chapters 36, verses 1 through 6. And the reason I chose this is because in this particular portion, it's very interesting that you can see Clement alluding to the book of Hebrews, if not explicitly citing from the book of Hebrews, indicating that Hebrews was a document that he was aware of, that he was using, and that Hebrews therefore would have already been written and in circulation during that apostolic era. And so let's read together 1 Clement chapter 36. Let's read verses 1 through 6. It says, "This is the way, beloved, in which we found our salvation, even Jesus Christ, the high priest of our oblations, the champion and defender of our weakness. Through him we look steadfastly to the heights of the heavens. Through him we behold as in a glass the immaculate and lofty countenance of God the Father. Through him the eyes of our heart were opened. Through him our foolish and darkened understanding springeth up again to his marvelous light. Through him the Lord hath willed us to taste of immortal knowledge, who, being the brightness of his glory, is so far better than the angels, as he hath by inheritance obtained a more excellent name than they. For it is thus written, who maketh his angels spirits, his ministers a flame of fire. But of his Son the Lord hath thus said, Thou art my son. Today have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I will give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the utmost parts of the world for thy possession. And again he saith unto him, Sit on my right hand until I make thy enemies thy footstool. Who then are the enemies? Even the wicked, and they who resist the will of God. That's just a snippet of this letter. You can find the full text for free on the internet if you would like to read through it. It's not so long that you couldn't read through it in, say, 25 or 30 minutes. And I would encourage you to begin to dive into some of these earliest of Christian writings. You will see some good, you will see some bad, but you will no doubt be benefited and edified by reading the writings of the teachers of the church going back to this earliest period.